Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you some different power profiles being used by the Lenovo Legion 5 Pro using the dedicated RTX on Warzone, and we will check out the different wattages the power profile bring, what kind of FPS and temperatures those profiles bring with it. So let's get started. Alright, so I'm just going into options first to see what I'm running. Gotta go here. Alright, so here are my options on graphical settings. Basically, I'm using Nvidia's optimized profile for Warzone. I haven't changed anything at all. Screen resolution is now set at 2560 x 1600. That's Quad HD for this display. It's a 1610 display. Later on in the video, at the end, I will also be showing you other display profiles. Well, basically, yeah, this is the normal optimized Nvidia settings. Notice that direct ray tracing is enabled. So yeah, let's start up a match. All right, here we are in the pre-game lobby. I'm running the quiet mode on the Lenovo Legion 5 Pro laptop. Right now it's outputting about 105 watts of power, and it alternates between 105 and 110, sometimes going a little bit up. The frames per second is, well, relatively low, of course, but for battery mode this is expected. Or I mean battery mode, I mean quiet mode or whisper mode, however you call it. The start of this video, or at least the start of the match, which will begin soon, I will be landing at Stadium. And right now I notice right away that on quiet mode it doesn't feel as smooth, and that hasn't anything to do with the frames per second, but it actually feels a little bit choppy. Latency is good, but and frames per second looks okay-ish, but it feels choppy. It's there's something wrong. You definitely notice the CPU being limited at this point. CPU utilization is about 50%. Temperatures are, well, below 70, which is actually very good for the GPU, that is. We'll be landing at Stadium for the remainder of this video to get an accurate reading of all the different power profiles. Let's just jump out. Yeah, the latency is really good. The frames, it runs fluid, but for some reason, I don't know exactly how to pinpoint this, but it's like it's skipping frames to get that to that profile. I do have to say, yeah, laptop itself is not quiet right now at the moment. They call it power profile quiet, but you definitely hear the fans blazing, which is of course normal when you're playing a graphically intense game. And GPU temperature keeps sitting at 68 degrees Celsius. While running at just above 104 watts. Frames per second is, well, I wouldn't use it for a first-person shooter. Well, I'm also going to show you the differences in Gulag as well. This is of course still quiet mode. Gulag is a much smaller area. Frames per second go a little higher there. It's like more stable testing environment. You can also see how the quiet mode profile is doing up here. Let's skip to the Gulag and get those braces on. 50 frames a second average. Okay, so here I am in another pre-game lobby. This time I'm still running on quiet mode right now. As you can see, it's at about 105 to 110 watts. Running 66 degrees because I just came from the main menu. And yeah, the standard frames per second we got used to. I'm going to switch to balance mode right now and see how it affects it. Right now I just switched to balance mode. As you can see, it just ups the wattage a bit. Now we're running 114, which is definitely more than quiet. Not that much, but about a 4 or 5 watts increase. This is not much. GPU temperature is now jumping to 70, 71 degrees Celsius. Frames per seconds are now at 50s. Yeah, it's still in the mid 50s. But I can hear the fans blowing a little bit more louder now as well. And again, we're aiming for Stadium to get comparable results. Unfortunately, it's a pretty long jump this time, so we'll be underway for a bit longer. I'm probably gonna cut this video so we can land at Stadium there. Okay, so here we're almost at Stadium. As you can see, GPU power still at 114 watts. This is basically what the balance profile does. It keeps it there. Frames per second have increased these past few minutes to 70, around 70, in the low 60s sometimes. And sometimes now, like jumping to 80, 86, because of the different environment, of course. The temperature is, the fans are keeping it at a stable temperature of 75 degrees Celsius. And I definitely notice it is a lot smoother. Of course, not only the frames have increased, but it's not skipping those frames anymore as they did in quiet mode. Also, the CPU should be unlocked right now to double the power. I think it would be restricted at around 25 watts, and now should be at 45 watts in balance mode. I noticed the fans going a little bit louder now because it's trying to keep the GPU stable at 75. You can see it going to 76. Fans are now trying to prevent it from going any hotter by going a little bit louder. So 75 degrees is like baseline GPU temperature. And again, this is yeah, your preferred power profile for regular gaming, I suppose. We're going to be checking out performance gaming soon. See how that influences the gameplay. 80 frames a second on everything high, ultra if possible, and ray tracing on, which is very nice. We remind that this is a 16:10 in ratio display. There's someone. Yeah, there was one flying with us to Stadium. Oh, being fired at. Alright, so now we're going into the Gulag, see how the settings are there. Alright, so here we are in the Gulag. 72, around 70 frames per second, which is fair. Oh yeah, that's a little bit Gulag performance for you. Nice that if you actually have so many objects here, frames are dropping, as you can see, compared to Gulag, to about mid 60s. So yeah, that's basically it for this power profile. It's about 115 watts, trying to stabilize it, keeping temperature at 75 degrees, and getting the varied frames per second depending on the scene, whether you're in Stadium or Gulag or right here on an open field. It actually gets to 80, almost 80 frames per second. And yeah, it feels very smooth to play. Latency is the same as in quiet mode, but it's not as choppy. It's because of the increased frames and the unlocked CPU. So yeah, in the next part I will be discussing performance mode. Just gotta go to an area over here. I'm gonna set it to performance mode, see what it does there. I'm switching to performance mode right now. Now it's in performance mode. Now immediately you can see a definite increase in watts. It's now at 130 watts, which is about 15 more average than what we had in balance mode. And the fans are also making a bit more noise right now. GPU temperature is also rising to 80 degrees. I'm getting... Yes, it's still just loading up the map a little bit, so we don't have the best frames per second right now. The fans have stepped up a notch. So if you want a game in performance mode, be sure to wear some headphones or put your speakers out really loud, because it's definitely audible. But it is very interesting to see that this small piece of tech, this laptop, actually watts the GPU to 140 almost, some cases. We do get a bit more increase in frames per second. I don't know if it's worth it though, playing in performance mode the whole time, because we are seeing well, just a small increase, while it is actually on 15 watts more. I do have to say that the fluidity of it is actually very nice. It's comparable to balance mode, but I do feel a small improvement when it comes to fluidity. And the frames are, well, they're better, of course, than balanced, but it's not like a huge increase. Alright, we're now a few minutes in the game, just got killed by a sniper. After a few minutes off performance mode, it's running fairly stable. The fan speeds have not changed, running still between 130 and 140 watts, and keeping the frame steady. Now we have a little bit of Gulag gameplay. See how that goes. Gulag now in performance mode has almost 90 frames a second. Is definitely an increase compared to the balanced mode we saw earlier. Oh, I got myself a flashbang. Fortunately, I'm not wearing the headset, so I don't really know where he's coming from. But yeah, basically, this is it for performance mode. Alright, so I've switched back to balanced mode right now. The power profile, as you can see, it's running between 110 and 115 watts. So the fans have stopped, has like gone down a notch. And well, if I have to compare the different power profiles, I mean, quiet mode, I wouldn't suggest gaming in quiet mode, at least not for this game. It feels pretty choppy. The frames, well, I don't really mind about frames that are around 40 or 50 frames a second. I think that's for me it's okay, but it did feel a little bit choppy for some reason. It's maybe because the CPU is also being quite limited on quiet mode. It has something to do with that. And when I switched to balance mode, I immediately noticed that the choppiness was was pretty much gone. And you can see the GPU power running between 120 and 115 watts instead of the low 105 quiet mode gives you. And it also gave you quite an increase in frames per second. And then we had performance mode after that. And that definitely showed what the Legion was capable of. It was actually capable of producing peaks of, well, even more than 140 watts in some instances. boosted well over that, which was quite amazing. And the temperatures were rising to about almost 80 Celsius. It's as you can see now in balance, it's staying stable at 75. In performance, it was hovering between 77 and 80. The fans were actually blowing quite loud. You did notice a small increase in fluidity, considering performance mode. But yeah, I don't know if it's actually worth it to keep playing in performance mode for extended periods of time. I suggest if you play balance mode, most of the time when you're playing games, just keep it in balance mode. And if you maybe, for example, in Warzone, get to the last 10 or 5 or whatever, you might maybe want to switch to performance mode to give you a slight edge, because that's just basically what it is. Performance mode is at best a slight edge in power. It gives you a few more frames. It might make it a little bit more fluid, but I don't think it's worth gaming for a long time in that mode, for considering the amount of power you're actually using extra, and the temperatures and the fans that are blowing a lot higher as well. Alright, so one of the questions that have been asked is how does it run on different resolutions? And how does it run on a different aspect ratio? Because some games are not able to output an aspect ratio of 16 by 10. So that's what we're gonna see right now. At the moment, I'm running Quad HD on a 16:10 aspect ratio. Quad HD is, in this case, let's see, I think it was 2560 by 1600 pixels. See here, 2560 by 1600, running wide at 16:10 aspect ratio. Now looking at the 2560 by 1600 resolution right now, I think it looks very nice. I'm coming from a 1080p PlayStation 4. So yeah, I really like the bumping quality and texture, just the overall graphics processing. It's much better on this RTX 3070. This, as you can see now, is at 2516 by 1600. Let's try going to 1920 times 1080. Now the problem with Warzone is when you put it on wide 16:9, I expected black bars, but instead Warzone scales it. And as you can see, there are no black bars. Now, in other games, you might see black bars, and then the resolution will be different. But as you can clearly see, it looks pretty ugly in Warzone. But I do think this is because of the scaling, because they tried to keep it in a 16:10 aspect ratio. I can't override that. If you might have black bars in other games that don't scale it like that, it might actually look better in 1080p, because then they won't scale it. But yeah, you can definitely see yeah, I think it's uglier. It's not as sharp as Quad HD, and I think it has to do with the scaling. So it might actually look better when you play a game that can scale and actually shows you black bars. The frames per second definitely have increased to above 100 on the balanced profile. Running at, of course, the balanced 115 watts, about 115 watts, keeping a temperature at 75 degrees of the GPU. But an increase in frames per second is definitely noticeable. It's very good. You definitely notice an extra fluidity in there. Choppiness is just completely gone. I'm now going to actually show you a very good aspect ratio that if you're worried about the future, or you wanna run a little bit higher FPS and wanna not go on Quad HD, which is basically the max resolution of this display, you can take let's put it on 16:10 aspect ratio, and you can take 1920 by 1200, which is it's basically the 16:10 ratio. It's basically the HD version of a 16:10 ratio. 1920 by 1200 is yeah, basically just that. And you can see frames are still yeah, hovering about 100 frames per second. So if you like the performance increase without a decreasing quality, like you want to like compared to 1920 by 1080, you just go this resolution, because it actually doesn't look that horrible. you probably might not see it because, yeah, it's being streamed on YouTube and rendered on video programming, and of course OBS maybe takes us a bite out of it as well. But I can guarantee you that this doesn't look as horrible as 1920 by 1080. While it does have the same performance, as you can see, it runs 102 FPS on balanced settings, balanced power profile. I'm going to switch it back to Quad HD again. That's 2560 times 1600. Let's apply it. And yeah, definitely the sharpness is back. Oh, I lost my Nvidia control panel here. Yeah, it's not going around 100 anymore. It's now about 75. And but there is an increase in picture quality that is quite noticeable. So yeah, that's basically it. If you're a performance gamer, you do 1920 by 1200, and if you do prefer a bit more quality, you go to Quad HD, and you definitely notice a bump in increase while still having very, very good frames a second. Well, basically that is it for this video. These are all the power profile settings explained, together with some demonstrations of different resolutions. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm gonna play some more games on this beautiful baby. And well, if you want to subscribe to my channel, you'll be notified of my live streams and maybe some more videos on the Legion 5 Pro, etc. And if you find this video helpful, don't forget to hit that like button, and I'll see you guys soon. Stay safe.